tingin sola ani samji trash le da ani thuji che shue yin dang bo ra ta de thuji ten che ani pheba de la ning da hone thu che na ani tare de Switzerland and Liechtenstein perimi mang jigsugi jigsugi ngene nyamje ge zogi jo mi top da hen zogi so chen the ngap chu ni pe kap pe nang jo mi top da chi xin chi du xin jo xin be ne dang la Switzerland and Liechtenstein perimi mang jisu ne Geneva sugar legu zerim uzu shue yin ani thongma de nyamje ge zogi dun dang du ani me ma le zum nang gu
So I'm going to read out today's program in English. So our program of demonstration during 52nd United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva on 27th February 2023 against the deteriorating human rights situation in Tibet. And the first, we have a gathering in front of United Nations building, and followed by the program starts with singing of Tibetan national anthem, followed by a minute of silence in memory and as a mark of respect to our martyrs.
되게 갑시베게 루 직니 시베데 되게 조웨데 도데 삼베노베 나바 텐저노 지가 제교웨그 지레게 롤저게 도제 감소된데 조게 잠재경 남교가 와가대 바고라베 왼서 대심하다게 의존제 가슴기게 라디기 조대사베냐 지식이 배우다 도대조주게 배zam리양 배개교 시대벨라주 배조대 제게세니 의기 자시은 나분도 조베시 나조 외유레 기교지 회gel로 아니 디제라 탄다 게제 바오 바모 남기 랑소 로이당에 남바솔라 아니 냥에 까마직 난교 두셔나 테네 메망기 겜베 난교
yeah, and the next followed by a slogan shouting.
Long live! Long live! Long live! Let the Dalai Lama! Let the Dalai
the Dalai Lama.
Return to Tibet!
Let the Dalai Lama.
Return to Tibet!
Let the Dalai Lama.
Return to Tibet!
We want justice.
In Tibet!
We want justice.
In Tibet!
We want justice.
In Tibet!
Stop genocide.
In Tibet!
Stop genocide.
In Tibet!
Stop.
TGSL Switzerland and Liechtenstein Parliament 소속 초안에 제공 운송기 송신 남규.
Our next program, we have a welcome speech by Ms. Kamachuki, the President of Tibetan Community in Switzerland and Liechtenstein.
Pegilana mebe uti samli shite tebe kosa jamko kuten chupshi chimbu chola kuchata kuzi ngundu sembe to ani tari de yamje gezo gu dun la to mi to ta ki chokche chokte nga chunga ni ki to la Switzerland and Liechtenstein purwi ma tikso ne kutu shube ki ani legu de pebe ki ani nga zu kong kuza kunju ngo chile la cho tang kunju leche cho sang la de de shin ki purwi ma chokshe kule ani mimang lenge chang la ani chamti tang ani mixe ki jeso yerang shugu yo tari de tuzu chale na ye tuzu chila ani kena zu ge tuzu ten chini pe na sha ta pe na gi ne tang di nye gi shumu ko be to ne nga chu ma gu chuk ju gi ne tang thap kyo chi ta kemi ki tuk chuk di ani kama ne ani pe te 도로 당겨 여바치 마시 야게 도에게 남아지 메뚜다네 아니 나라주 라와 개가 슝에 보면 저기 강만시 전체니 아니 레구 디타볼라 아니 레구 잡았다냐 슈나 왜디 개침부지 동고도 다른 얘기 든든치 인체톤의 슈처버치 아니 아주 남규 니슈치 야 Today we have gathered in front of the United Nations on the 52nd session of the United Nations Human Rights Commission to protest against the deteriorating situation in Tibet. Since the illegal invasion and occupation of Tibet by China, over 1 million Tibetans have been either killed or died due to direct result of China's heavy-handedness. Today, we also mark the sad anniversary of the first self-immolation protest in Tibet by Tape. On 27th February, he gave up his life. When he took this extreme step in 2009 to express the unimaginable and unbearable human rights conditions for Tibetans under Beijing rules, he was merely 20-year-old monk. Despite about 160 self-immolation made by Tibetans living inside Tibet, according to the calculations made by the International Tibet Network, the basic rights of the Tibetans had not only improved but has worsened many folds. Under the Communist Party's rule, life of the Tibetans, Uyghurs, Southern Mongolians are like hell on earth. Tibetans and Uyghurs still place high hopes on the August Office of the United Nations. A prominent Tibetan writer, a passionate educator, and a fiercely outspoken public intellectual, Go Sherab Gyatso had been imprisoned by the Chinese authorities 4 times. His first arrest at the age of 22 was for the crime of inciting separatism. It is one of the key pretexts used by China to implicate Tibetan political prisoners. The less talked about is there are at least 5 known persecutions by China of Tibetan environment defenders too. There are arbitrary arrests and even imprisonment of Tibetan environmentalists. This reveals the Chinese government's true level of operation and aims in environmental management, despite its supposed global position as being committed to sustainability. The facts on the ground contradicts this strong claim. Therefore, Tibetan community in Switzerland and Liechtenstein call upon China to release Panchen Lama and all the political prisoners unconditionally and with immediate effect. We call upon the human rights defenders, members of the civil societies and United Nations and its human rights mechanism to push Xi Jinping to stop arbitrary arrests of innocent Tibetans and Uyghurs and to restore dignity and freedom enshrined in the United Nations charters to which China is bound. Until then, we will gather here and protest month after month, year after year. May His Holiness the Dalai Lama can return to Tibet. May our brothers and sisters in Tibet can meet His Holiness the Dalai Lama in person in Potala. May peace and harmony and brotherhood promoted by His Holiness the Dalai Lama shrines in Tibet, East Turkestan and Southern Mongolia. Free Tibet! Free Tibet! Free Tibet! Pei Gyalo! Pei Gyalo! Amate gyawar mu chekuze shabet temba ta pyogi tenda nyutu sevegi myndu to antari de phenge changala chitang soshön gi zerim thoni tuche shure ngaran zu gyule ge tuche sosu chongse mingdo ne lenge changala tuchu temba la ning tabane tuche shui.
Ani DJ la sagu seda toja nangu.
The next we have reading out the press release of Tibetan community in Switzerland and Liechtenstein.
Press statement by Tibetan community Switzerland and Liechtenstein. 26 February 2023, members of the Tibetan community in Switzerland and Liechtenstein are gathered in front of the United Nations Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights in protest against China's continued violations of fundamental freedom of the Tibetan people in Tibet. As the 52nd session of the Human Rights Council is currently underway in Palace, the nation, members of the Tibetan community in Switzerland and Liechtenstein yet again call upon the United Nations and its leadership to take concerted actions in bringing China accountable for heinous violations of human rights in Tibet. The situation in Tibet is deteriorating significantly with China's ever-growing separations and subjugations of the Tibetan people. There is a new threat to Tibet for the past few years. China has been systematically collecting DNA samples from Tibetans. As many as 1.2 million Tibetans have had DNA samples taken, including children as young as 5. This mass DNA collection allows Beijing to build a genetic database, expanding its ability to strip Tibetans of their privacy and place them under constant surveillance. The mass harvesting of genetic data is the manner in abhorrently racist, widely disproportionate and in the hands of the Chinese government and police will enable yet more human rights abuses. The plunder of the Tibetan DNA is being enabled by international companies, key among them, Thermo Fisher Scientific. Furthermore, China's relentless subjugation and suppressions of Tibetan people's culture, religion and language through various state-led assimilatory policies are causes of serious concern. The list of human rights violations by China in Tibet is long list. Besides, there is alarming forced assimilation and separation of 1 million Tibetan children in Tibet by China. Tibetan minority children are being affected by Chinese government policies aimed at culture, religious and linguistics assimilation through a forced residential school system. Furthermore, The so-called residential school systems for Tibetan children appears to act as a mandatory large-scale program intended to assimilate Tibetans into majority Han culture contrary to international human rights standards. We call upon the United Nations to press China to close down these so-called residential schools and to provide detailed reports on the same. In view of the unresolved, worrisome situation in Tibet, the community calls the Office of High Commissioner to bring Tibet on the agenda. Bringing Tibet on the agenda is crucial for countering China. Hence, the community urges the United Nations Office to hear, analyze, and monitor the situation of Tibet meaningfully with concerted action to mitigate the suppression of Tibetan people by the government of China. Tibetan community in Switzerland and Liechtenstein. TGSL,
Next we have again a slogan shouting. And Mimana Dindia Kembe Getendegi Yogan Yapirona.
Not a crime.
Being Tibetan
is not a crime.
Being Tibetan
Is not a crime.
Being Tibetan
Is not a crime.
Bejalo
Bejalo.
Bejalo
Bejalo.
Bejalo
Bejalo.
Tibet is burning.
China is lying.
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 Stop collecting in Tibet. Stop collecting.
Tibetan DNA.
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 Stop sinicizing.
Tibetan children.
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 Shame on.
Chinese government.
Shame on.
Chinese government.
Shame on.
Chinese government.
Shame on.
Chinese government.
Free Tibet.
Free Tibet.
Free Tibet.
Free Tibet.
Free Tibet. Tibet!
Free Tibet!
Free Tibet!
Free Tibet!
UNO!
We want justice!
UNO!
We want justice!
UNO!
We want justice!
UNO!
We want justice!
Wake up! Wake up!
United Nations!
Wake up! Wake up!
United Nations!
No more sleeping!
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 United Nations!
Long live!
His Holiness the Dalai Lama!
Long live!
His Holiness the Dalai Lama!
Long live!
His Holiness the Dalai Lama!
Let the Dalai Lama!
Return to Tibet!
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 We want justice!
In 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 Tibet!
UNO!
We want justice!
UNO!
We want justice!
UNO!
We want justice!
UNO!
We want justice!
No more sleeping!
United Nations!
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 Wake up! Wake up!
United Nations!
Wake up! Wake up!
United Nations!
Wake up! Wake up!
United Nations!
Tibet is burning!
China is lying!
Tibet is burning!
China is lying!
Tibet is burning!
China is lying!
Shame on!
Chinese government!
Shame on!
Chinese government!
Shame on!
Chinese government!
Shame on!
Chinese government!
Stop killing!
In Tibet!
Stop killing!
In Tibet!
Stop killing!
In Tibet!
Stop the torture!
In Tibet!
Stop the torture!
In Tibet!
Stop the torture!
In Tibet!
Long live!
His Holiness the Dalai Lama!
Long live!
His Holiness the Dalai Lama!
Long live!
His Holiness the Dalai Lama!
Hey, chalo!
Hey, hello!
Hey, chalo!
Hey, hello!
Hey, chalo!
Hey, hello! 도시나 아니 디제라 시스 구섭 전제 공원진리 주기 나처럼 소시난교
Next, I would like to invite Ms. Tina Trigula, a representative of Office of Tibet, Geneva.
Tari nyamjay gyachogi domi thokdan hencho tengam chu nani gi kembe gi nimodelia pebe Swiss tang Liechtenstein phori thokba chokchu ube gule namba tang thagana shingi tharinde jombe mima lenge changmololia thomadelia samti shuba tang thagana shingi chokcho bisungba nangda number 2 tha ringbune namshi changmo dinjelia pesha tochi che shuai naran chugi lenge che shudi ke che shudi kari cha de gu shubina pelang le yobe peme chulia manju muthini number 2 le gap gyo dang manju muthini number 2 che do ke ge ge yo da la di chenso langya di ke chembure sha chenso di quran chu chipo member che naran chu tenjo na le yobe peme chulie di chenso langya di ke chembu cha sha di indu galya tharingi kebe di lia pebe mima lenge changolo lia tochi che shuai di da jani chik shuya lia ta Europe yongi peri chokpa ne sumchu thojengi kebe di Italy gi Rome la thalo chogi yore di lia mima lenge chone kha mangma chik gyabgyo nangro nang thagane shingi Tandegi sumchu thojengi chondu di Europe stands with Tibet chadegi yore di indu galia peri chokpa yongi goti nang ne di chogi yodu galia
Mimanto ne Kamanga Chingam Shunanga di Kechabucha di Gudo, Delia number 2 gi Gabgo gi Namgetone Inchi Minji, Kamanga Chik Pero Na Shuain. Antine Taringi Namje Gazogi Tsundu Dajani, Indianalia, Sikashi Chik Shuchoga Chishuain. Today, on the 52nd UN Human Rights Council meeting, the Swiss and Liechtenstein Tibetan community has organized this protest to remember and to remind the world that Tibet remains an unresolved international conflict. Due to this conflict, the human rights situation in Tibet has seen much deterioration. On this 52nd UNHRC Council meeting, it is important that the member states once again bring the attention of the world, attention of the international leaders to the human rights situation in Tibet. I, on behalf of the Tibetan community, the Tibetan people, both inside and outside of Tibet, would like to appeal the UN to take its mandate seriously and to take concrete action to make China accountable for all the human rights violations that have occurred since the 1950s. Recently, we had the UNCSR review of China. This was the third cycle of its review, and the UN committee members critically questioned China on its violations. And what we saw in those review meetings was that China just casually put everything under the rug, and it said, everybody is happy in Tibet, everybody is prosperous in Tibet, everybody is doing fine. If that is the situation, why do we have more than 150 self-immolations in Tibet? I think that is a very, very pertinent question to be asked against China in all its reviews. What we have also seen is that China has been conducting systematic sinicization of Tibetan culture, Tibetan language, and Tibetan identity. We had the recent press release of the UN experts which said that nearly 1 million Tibetan children are being forcefully assimilated and subjected to sinicization in Tibet. This is unprecedented number. We have also had reports of nearly 1 million Tibetans being subjected to DNA tests. There are cases of widespread iris scan being collected of Tibetans. And all these are basically targeted to ensure that Tibetans are systematically persecuted. There is widespread surveillance, and that Tibetans cannot speak their mind against the Chinese authorities. It is time that the UN really stands up and calls on China to ensure that the human rights of Tibetans are not only guaranteed but are also implemented and enforced. It is time that the Pension Lama, the 11th Pension Lama of Tibet, is released, access is granted, and that Tibetans have their enshrined right to choose their own religious leaders and practice their own religion. Therefore, in this regard, I would like to once again state that the UN really needs to stand up. It has to listen to its own UN experts. Nearly 50 experts have called for a special session on China at the UNHRC. They've called for a special mechanism to monitor the human rights violations in China, including, of course, Tibet, East Turkestan, and other regions. It is time UN not just stands up but also listens to its own experts. With this, I would like to thank all the Tibetans, all the supporters who have come here today, despite the difficult weather conditions, and for extending your support. Thank you.
Sur la touche en chouette, DJ là, mais moi, les Québécois n'ont que. Mais moi, les Québécois n'ont pas. Pingé là, tu n'as pas de.
Long life! Long life!
His Holiness the Dalai Lama!
Long life!
His Holiness the Dalai Lama!
Long life!
His Holiness the Dalai Lama!
Let the Dalai Lama!
Return to Tibet!
Let the Dalai Lama!
Return to Tibet!
Let the Dalai Lama!
Return to Tibet!
We want justice!
In 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 Tibet!
Stop the genocide!
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 In Tibet!
Tibet is burning!
China is lying!
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 Stop collecting!
Tibetan DNA!
Stop collecting!
Tibetan DNA!
Stop collecting!
Tibetan DNA!
Stop collecting!
Tibetan DNA!
Shame of China!
Shame! Shame!
Shame of China!
Shame! Shame!
Shame of China!
Shame! Shame!
Shame on China!
Shame! Shame!
Shame on China!
Shame! Shame!
Shame on China!
Shame! Shame!
Free Tibet!
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 Long life!
Dalai Lama!
Long life!
Dalai Lama!
Long life!
Dalai Lama!
Long life!
Dalai Lama!
Let the Dalai Lama!
Return to Tibet!
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 Speaking Tibetan!
It's not a crime!
Speaking Tibetan!
It's not a crime!
Speaking Tibetan!
공개 맵을 다 뒤집듯이 그어줘서 아니 뒤지라 양쪽 개설수 수익 조장난교
Now we have reading out a appeal letter. The appeal letter is addressed to Mr. Volker Turk, the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Palaces Nations, Geneva 10. In the subject, we have written appeal letter for your attention on situation in Tibet. Your Excellency, the Tibetan Community community in Switzerland and Liechtenstein would like to highlight the plight of Tibetans, the human rights situations of Tibetans in Tibet. In every Human Rights Council sessions, we have been submitting appeal letters calling for an urgent action from the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights to help protect the rights of the Tibetan people under China's control. The response from your predecessor has been disheartening and daunting. However, we have not given up and continue to place our faith in the good offices of the United Nations, especially when the people inside Tibet still look upon the office of High Commissioner, believing their voice will be heard and do justice for Tibet. The situation in Tibet is deteriorating significantly. The government of the People's Republic of China systematically denies every facet of fundamental rights of Tibetan people. And today, the survival of the Tibetan people with its distinct culture and identity is under severe threat. Any expression which deviates from the official line of Chinese Communist Party is subjected to arbitrary arrest, incommunicado detention, enforced disappearance, unjust sentencing and torture. Despite severe political and social clampdown in Tibet, Tibetans continue to speak up for basic rights as enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Your Excellency, the violation of human rights in Tibet by the government of China is a long list. In this appeal letter, we would like to particularly draw your attention for two most pressing issues that call for now or never to bring the United Nations Human Rights Monitoring and Protection Mechanism in action with regards to Tibet. First, systematic collections of DNA samples from Tibetans in Tibet. There is a new threat to Tibet. For the past few years, China has been systematically collecting DNA samples from Tibetans. As many as 1.2 million Tibetans have had DNA samples taken, including children as young as 5 years old. This mass DNA collections allow Beijing to build a genetic database, expanding its ability to strip Tibetans of their privacy and place them under constant surveillance. The mass harvesting of genetic data in this manner is abhorrently racist, widely disproportionate, and in the hands of the Chinese government and police will enable yet more human rights abuses. This plunder of Tibetans' DNA is being enabled by international companies, key among them Thermo Fisher Scientific. Secondly, false residential school for Tibetan children in Tibet. A press release from the Office of United Nations High Commissioner of Human Rights, OHCHR, recognized that roughly 1 million Tibetan children are currently being affected by the residential school system, which appears to act as a mandatory large-scale program intended to assimilate Tibetan into majority Han culture. In such schools, children as young as 4 years old are forced to complete a compulsory education in Mandarin Chinese language instead of the Tibetan language. The residential schools do not provide any substantive teachings of the Tibetan language nor of Tibet's traditions or culture. Those special reporters shared concerns that such an education is causing Tibetan children to lose touch with their language and culture, as well as eroding their ability to communicate with their families. These sentiments echoes the words of Dr. Gelo, a Tibetan educational sociologist who has performed extensive research into the residential schooling system in Tibet. Quote, the Chinese government is tearing families apart and forcing these vulnerable children to become stranger to their own Tibetan culture. With China's education policy to inter-ethnic marriage policy and ever-growing push for the Buddhism with Chinese characteristic, the fundamental freedoms of Tibetans to practice and preserve centuries-old Tibetan Buddhist culture and tradition is systematically denied. In the name of bilingual education policy, teaching in the Tibetan language is being replaced by Mandarin. Tibetans without Chinese language skills are often sidelined with a limited or no opportunities in the job market due to state-led assimilatory policy in Tibet. An increasing number of Tibetan children cannot write, speak, and even understand Tibetan language in Tibet. Hence, the state of Tibetan language, culture, and identity is at stake. With China's colonial style boarding schools in Tibet, Tibetan children as young as age of 4 years old are taken away from family, own community and culture in order to destroy one's own cultural upbringing and install Chinese characteristic upbringing. Your Excellency, in view of the above highlighted two key issues, we request Your Excellency to speak and defend human rights independent from any form of influences and pressure, including China. We request Your Excellency to keep the voice of the victims of human rights abuses, including Tibetans, our state's engagement in and interaction with OHCHR. We request Your Excellency to strengthen the Office of High Commissioner of Human Rights, monitoring mechanisms, human rights monitoring mechanisms and reporting capacity on the violation of human rights by China. We also request Your Excellency to keep Tibet on agenda for holistic approach in addressing violation of human rights by China. This letter has been undersigned by the Tibetan community, the President of Tibetan community in Switzerland and Liechtenstein, and the Vice President of Tibetan community in the Switzerland and Liechtenstein. Thank you. We would like to invite the representative of Swiss Tibetan Friends Association to kindly address the gathering.
Dear Mrs. Representative of TGSL President Karma Shuki, dear representative of the Tibet office in Geneva, Mrs. Shuki Timre, dear representative of the Youth Association in Europe, dear friends of Tibet, it's my pleasure and privilege to address you on behalf of the Swiss Tibetan Friendship Society and to convey to you the cordial greetings of our President, Mr. Thomas Burley. Our organization has been working for many years in close contact with the Tibetan community in Switzerland to maintain and strengthen the solidarity of the Swiss people with the Tibetan people and Tibet. I would like to greet the representatives of the Tibetan community in Switzerland and to ensure you of our full support in your peaceful struggle for the recognition of the political, economic, cultural and religious rights of the Tibetan people in their country and through all the world. As the 52nd session of the Human Rights Council is taking place, the situation in Tibet has further worsened following a carefully planned strategy by the Chinese authorities. Arrests are multiplying, surveillance is increasing, nomads are being settled, religious practices are forbidden, even prayer flags can no longer be used. The Tibetan language is more and more marginalized and its defenders persecuted. Communist party cells are implanted in the monasteries, preventing any serene religious practices. There is a policy of ethnocide, of systematic destruction of the identity of the Tibetans. On February 6, a press release from UN independent experts alerted public opinion to the fate of 1 million Tibetan children who are forced to leave their families and join residential schools. There, they are forced to complete a compulsory education in Mandarin Chinese without access to traditional or culturally relevant learning. As a result, Tibetan children are losing their facility with their native language and the ability to communicate easily with their parents and grandparents in the Tibetan language, which contributes to their assimilation and erosion of their identity, the experts said. The expert raised as well concerns about substantial increase in the number of residential schools operating in and outside of the Tibet Autonomous Region. These policies are violations of the prohibition of discrimination and the rights to education, linguistic and cultural rights, freedom of religion or belief, and other minority rights of the Tibetan people. Whether it is the Uyghurs, the citizens of Hong Kong, or the people of Inner Mongolia, the source of the human rights violations they suffer remains the same: the absolute power of a regime that doesn't want democracy and wants to eradicate it. This is a grim picture, and yet it should not discourage us, and we should keep hope. I am thinking here of the many NGOs that tirelessly denounce the fate of human rights defenders in Tibet, of those who denounce the Chinese government tactics to undermine the independence of human rights committees. I am thinking of the lobbying work of the Swiss Parliamentary Group for Tibet before the Federal Council in order to have human rights respected in China. I am also thinking of the more than 20 municipalities in Geneva and the dozens of other municipalities and cities in Switzerland that will raise the Tibetan flag on March the 10th. All these activists and people from all over the world are struggling for democracy and protection of human rights in Tibet and elsewhere in China. Dear friends, we are and we will always be at your side as long as Tibet is not liberated. Keep the hope alive and we will help to make it happen. Long live free Tibet. Thank you.
Thank you. We have next followed by again the slogan shouting. Sorry.
Dalai Lama, return to Tibet. Let the Dalai Lama return to Tibet. Stop genocide in Tibet. Stop genocide in Tibet. Stop genocide in Tibet. Tibet is burning. China is lying. Tibet is burning. China is lying. Tibet is burning. China is lying. Stop collecting Tibetan DNA. Stop collecting Tibetan DNA. Stop collecting Tibetan DNA. Stop collecting Tibetan DNA. Stop collecting. Stop synthesizing. Stop synthesizing. Tibetan children. Stop synthesizing. Tibetan children. Stop synthesizing. Tibetan children. Shame on China. Chinese government. Shame on China. Chinese government. Shame on China. Chinese government. Long live Dalai Lama. Long live Dalai Lama.
The next program we have World Thanks Party by Vice President of Tibetan Community in Liechtenstein. After studying there, Zambulim ki nyamde keso Gwami ki ane soje Teng wati ngani Sode ki ane Wala semampu chokul Sidu ki legi ki toa de legi Ane Swiss kumo tenju Ane chine chukula ka ane asing kumo charo Taka nasing ki Swiss alisa kurin ma dikso ki Ane soto kam chukula Ane kene shungde ki tanda de Studio zare sobagi ane Mercury chota transikongi ane charo an thansi ngaranzo tela schedule chibegi ane peridina lenge thamalo na pari ane tize kyanzi di nize ki na ane perin tize tense tize ozu masne cha simbush tense perin de chibina to perin de ngazam chuna to betelaya 아니 고디 슌게 아니 드리마게 아니 소바 소드네 시베게 아니 소메게 아니 그런 상황을 하고는 도체 쉬어다 아나 뭐지 아니 냠게 계속 동상도 다른게 아니 제시 소니게 다 생활하서 배우 나오나 아니 지은이 샘플 컬렉션이 다 생활하서 배우는 쉬어버나 다다 릭세게 One conde was the Quran group share, you go chiche, Nibadilla. Ani Pugul Lona Chunju Shivishne, Longi, no Shimasne, Yakas, Ganiki, and Sinamine, and Kraziki, the Lapalapa, Deja Lapa, Kendi Lapalapa, some of the chiche, as a Predeki, Vigita, Komshita, Kajika, and Kraziki, the Missy, the Kachi Chese, Bigi, Siju, Yamatela, Raziki, and Kari. tembe ki ko na mo su ki shi so ni di de ko na mo su ki sha shi tembe ta ku yo re ang ran zu su chi de na ni ka ji te ri na wa zu pe ba 하고도 나와서 근데 저와서 또 보내기다 근데 모든 가다보다 겹치 간다이네야 나와서 당 와도 샤샤베나 와도 나처럼 그런 샤샤베나 그 나만의 수단에 모두 이거 소차되기에 당나라한테 문제지 시대이나 와서 문제가 그래서 그 얘기 아니 나라도 갑자기 나라도 모든 내 거에다 모두 모든 내 거에다 모든 갑자기 제 거에다 나라도 내내 또 차려야 돼. 이 거라 나라도 다 무엇이 보다 나와서 되게 다 나시 예수 간단히는 봐서 상황이 나라도 이가라 나라도 내게 가리는 것이 나라도 하고에게 뺏겨서 도와서도 한다. 지금 고스탄고 치무초기 내가 그런 남대치나 근데 소위 증기도 나타나고 나와서 미 간단히 것을 카페차고 이내야 야매도 좀 어떻게 배워이나 야매 어떻게 단에서 공부해야 돼. 단에서 공부해도 가르스나 본성 모두 농가도 있어야지 농가 정화지 모두 다다 짝지면 잘 해야지 야매기 다 본성에 배워서 제정 모두 도시간이 있어야 돼. 오늘 공부 약속 쉬어고 있다. 지금 아무나 본성이 간이쳐야 내가 치다한테 당당을 안 쓰기 이날에 캠프에 나오나 별게 딱뭐 변이 이인가 아니 정면정대에도 다양한 구마대야 나오셔 세직세 아니 저도 거스탄고 좀 구세 질문 들었던 거 쇼세 되네 당신 나와서 되게 별거 탐내기 나와서 공부 약속 쉬어야 되나 나와서기 다 속도 내보다 제도 내보다 가르스나 완전히 미세 나오나 배바기 미세 나오나 간에 근데 제외도 가나 완전히 미세나 감자지 가르쳐고 쉬어야 미세나나 간지지만에 당대 멤버들 누구 예배는 먼저나 뽑아지 가리고 해야 돼. 내가 이제 간지시간 되고 싶으면 당고 지키면 되나? 내가 야구 지키면 되나? 카드자고 해도 내가 카드자였으면 내가 지다는데 당고 생기면 걸러나나? 그럼 미치나 가지고 사셔나 거기 카드자마도 그냥 카드 거기 내가 지켜도 되는 게 놓아셔서 내 미코라는 문제 공부다. 스네 지기래. 원서게 카드 단다 그냥 되나 원서 남들 계속 되나 temple 개다기 여기 단다 원서 그 단다 마세 보도 원서 내 거야다 원서 그 모든 다리 시켜대 로종아 계속 다리 대기에 다리 미셔서는 내가 이거나 원서 간에서 마음을 지키는 모든 여자들이 뭐지 답이 괜히 쳐버리나 아니 양자 원서 답고 뒤에 원서 빨리 하고 자기 이번에 계세요 제상한 원서기 미세나로나 야매기 나라도 내내시도 제법 내생기 나라매기 미세나나 와주기 미셔바이나 지도 수행내라 하듯이 당대 내버지 통고도 되거나 인생 민지 소소기 스탠드 랭귀지 뺏게 좀 도스 당고 맨날 당고 내버리 이 미들 카피자 미들 막아고 말해 네 소소기 스탠드 인지 미지네 예선에 지금 말다스 야매서서 야매 트란스 시도도 노데여다스 근데 지금 또 왜나 소소네 보고 마음만의 소소기 내가 미바 이게 정말 소리를 말해 가지고 되게 말한 그 매너 공시다 보고지 때도베나 미세니 간이 되기를 자원이 상계면도 다른 시기 말아서 배그 자동 그 탑재되냐 못 되내셔서 내게 그래서 뭐 제가 아닌데 평이 기나죠 말아서 그 별이 본다 샤가 찍바 갖고 지교 아니 사다 림부 딘데네 페이지 남시다 남시 장나 딘데라 마데베 돈에 기나 공에 제메도는 남기는 페이지에 기나 생겨 참을러는 얘기 주민이 돈이야 한민 가면 수치스 다른 시기 못 되네 기나저기 아니 다라게 잡죠다 다시기 뒤에 뒤에서 어저 딘데기 겜비가 내고 된다나야 간다 센신한 게 이내래 소소 컨디션 바이네 모저기들 냠슈 제거다 한 레벨이 개심부 대양 모저기 미도 되게 랭게 소치 가래서나 야 코로나 카페차 죽어지 멤버시 나란서 배반 나오는 모저기 시가다 모저기 우주 잡는 모저기 소소기 강하게 랭게 데려다 슈가 되고 개심부지 통고도 제가 가린데 지금은 랭게 상물로 니 당번에 두지체 나서 두지체나 In the next, we have Tenzin Lam, a word of truth prayer dedicated to His Holiness Dalai Lama and to our martyrs.
TGSL Tenzin Lam Denangku. Ani getuptenla, getomla, ani Nam
자와 배와제 미세레게 Amen.